let's talk a little bit about who they might be blocking for. So Trey Sermon was a player that the 49ers went up, drafted, moved up to draft in the third round. What do you have you looked at much tape of Trey Sermon? And if you have, what do you see in him? And how do you think he's going to fit into Kyle Shanahan's running game?
He's an aggressive zone runner. He loves the physicality of the game. And now Ohio State runs their fair amount of outside and inside zone. I think they do a pretty good mix. It's kind of like the hybrid version of Urban Meyer's and Chip Kelly's offense, because Ryan Day coached for both of them. So they both like Chip Kelly really loved the outside zone, and Urban Meyer's more of an inside zone guy. So with Trey Sermon, you get a little bit of both. Early on, he kind of reminds me a little bit of Carlos Hyde in that he's a very physical runner. But I think he's a much better outside runner than Hyde was. Hyde was primarily an inside zone guy coming out of OSU. So I think he has a leg up in that regard. And he's a guy who is a very good pass catching back. Last season, watching some of the running backs catch passes out of the backfield, I think Shanahan really puts a premium on some of that stuff. And they, outside of a few big plays, you kind of get bobbled passes here and there, maybe some drops in there with Mostert and Wilson. And Shanahan's a guy who really likes to use the running backs in the passing game, and you just haven't seen that a lot. Obviously, injuries to the position have dictated where they go with this. So, McKinnon being hurt, Hasty got hurt last year, Mostert and Wilson all got hurt, Coleman. And those, McKinnon and Coleman would have been the primary pass catching guys because that's how they've been utilized throughout their career. And that's especially how Shanahan used Coleman. And it just didn't pan out. And I think going the route what they did with Trey Sermon and Elijah Mitchell signals a big shift in the running back room, that maybe Mostert and Wilson aren't going to be around much longer.
Yeah, and I kind of looked at it like trying to go back to what happened in 2019. So 2019, obviously the running game was very elite, ranked 2 in the league. And they had that three-headed monster with Tevin Coleman, Breida, and Mostert. And, Breida and Mostert obviously were the speedsters that would come in and, they were averaging ridiculous yards per carry the whole season. But Tevin Coleman was the guy who took most of the bulk of the hits, right? He was mostly the guy that was in for pass protection, and he was the guy that was mainly running through the tackles versus the sweeps that Breida and Mostert would go on. So I think they missed that last season because Mostert ended up taking a bulk of the carries, and he just isn't built big enough, which is why he was injured. So I really see maybe Coleman and a guy like Gallman coming in, taking a bulk of the beating to open up those lanes for Mostert to just do his home run hitting style and average, 4 or 5 yards a carry, which he could definitely do behind this offensive line, and especially if Kittle's healthy as well. Do you think that Trey Sermon could fit into that Coleman role? Do you think he's built to be able to take over that type of position?
Oh, absolutely. He didn't have I don't think he had a 200 plus carry season at Ohio State. So I don't think there's any concerns about durability or how much mileage he has on his legs. I think he's going to last, probably at least 5 or 6 years. Most running backs don't last more than 2-3 years, maybe 4 at the most, a rookie contract. And that's kind of the last you see of them, unless you've got like a Dalvin Cook or a Kamara or a Nick Chubb or anything. And I think maybe, I don't know if Sermon can get to that level, but in Shanahan's scheme, they don't need to. Yeah. They're going to be, if they're running out there with Mostert, Wilson, Mitchell, and Sermon, they don't need to rely on one guy. And I don't think Sermon's going to be an every down kind of guy. I think he's going to be primarily an early down back. That's what he was at OSU. I think that'll stay the same. So they'll definitely be running back by committee again. But I think, in 2022, it's going to be the Trey Sermon show for sure. I think this year is just going to be to kind of get him ready and used to the style of offense that he's going to be playing in.
Do you see him as somebody who could be a 3-down back? And mainly I'm thinking, like, can he read in pass protection, be able to pick up the loose blitzer or whatever? Have you seen that type of vision with him? Because that was something Coleman was actually really good at, and something that I think we're lacking. I don't know if Mostert could play that type of role. Not too sure about Gallman, what his ability is there. But do you see that in Sermon being a 3-down back?
Absolutely. He had. I'm looking at some of my numbers here, the notes that I have. He had 240 plus snaps in the passing game, and he gave up, I think, 9 pressures and 1 sack. So yeah, I'd say that's pretty good. He's a pretty good pass blocking back, and that's what Coleman was. I don't really think that's Mostert's strength. So I think that's where Trey Sermon can come in and eventually be a 3-down back, but I don't think he'll be that right away.
And one thing that I really like about Sermon, he seems like he has that mentality that he doesn't mind to put a team on his back. He had some pretty amazing games with Ohio State, even though they had so much talent there. It seemed like he was their consistent person that was always performing. So, I feel like that attitude and that mentality can really transition well into the 49ers backfield, because I don't know if we have that mentality right now. I think Mostert wants to be that kind of guy, but physically, I don't know if he's capable of. It seems like that would be a big upgrade, and he seems more of like a Kyle Shanahan type guy to me than like a Mostert, right? He seems more of that cut from the cloth of being able to do everything that Shanahan looks for from running back.
Yeah, one thing to keep in mind though too is running backs in a Shanahan scheme don't often last long. I mean,
True.
They typically fall off a huge cliff. I mean, Alfred Morris was turning in 1,400 plus yard seasons his rookie contract, and then he fell off a cliff after that. And then it's true of all running backs, but it's particularly in Shanahan's offense, after a couple of years in it seems to have taken a toll. Even they got Devonta Freeman in his prime, and it kind of took a toll on him. He hasn't been the same since. And then you look at other backs around the league. It's going to be interesting to see how Dalvin Cook does this year, because they run the same offense. Todd Gurley, kind of hit a wall. And even in his worst year, he still had 800 or 900 yards, but he looked noticeably different. I can't, some of the other offenses, I don't know. I don't remember. The Rams just lost another running back, last week or whatever.
Right.
But that was completely, not game related or anything. But you have to find a number of running backs that you can have at your disposal to run this offense, because it does take a toll on them constantly. Getting in space and hitting guys all the time like Mostert does. I mean, these guys run incredibly hard, so it just seems like every back in Shanahan's offense at some point falls off a cliff. So I think that's why we can see them continually taking guys year after year in the draft or undrafted or whatever. You just can't have enough of them.
Yeah, and I was excited that they actually took somebody in the top 3 rounds, because there seems to be a big distinction between talent that's taken in the top 3 rounds versus talent that's taken below that, as far as productivity in the league right off the bat. So I wrote an article for that, like in all 49ers before, that those top 3 top 3 rounds, running backs tend to do so much better than guys that are below that. So it's great that they actually did that, because I think you're right. If we didn't draft a guy like Trey Sermon, we're looking at this running back room thinking, wow, this is kind of not a good, yeah, pretty thin, and could be another struggle season, but that's great.